The Caro-Kann has a lot of fans, especially in Gotham City, and if your opponent learned chess there, here's how to book him a one-way ticket to Blundermill. Let me show you what they're hoping for and how you can turn this around. Initially, you go for these two knights variation, and then they trade on e4 and develop their knight, offering you to trade on f6. This is exactly what they're hoping for. Here, it leads to the so-called Tartakower variation. Indeed, very simple, very beginner-friendly and solid for black. They're going to develop bishop castle, and their position is very safe. Instead of exchanging knights, defend your knight, which immediately gets them out of their home prep, and now they start thinking by themselves. In most cases, they're going to trade knights right here on e4. If not, you can consider taking there yourself, because then this pawn is going to be pinned, and therefore he'll have to trade and kind of have an unusual pawn structure, and from there, they're not sure what to do next. If they try to maintain their pawn structure by providing this defense, then you're going to turn this into a nightmare. Usually your opponent will exchange knights right here, and then he'll start thinking how to continue his development. Normally black would wish to develop his bishop somewhere, but he can't do this because your queen controls all these squares. Of course your opponent can just play very passively like this and just castle, but that is very passive. This bishop can get out, and you just play normal chess, and you've got a great position. Therefore, instead your opponents will typically develop this other knight forward, trying to kick your queen away. Then you develop your bishop, they indeed attack your queen, you drop it back, and now they'll usually try to execute their idea, bishop g4, developing this bishop, pinning your knight, then they're hoping for e6, getting their usual Caro-Kann setup. And if your opponent was dreaming of becoming a superhero, such as a Batman, you can help him at least become a Blunderman. You can give the queen and finish the game. Very often your opponents will choose to play the classical system with bishop f5. That's how they typically proceed in the main line of the Caro-Kann defense. But here there is a subtle but super important difference. We've got this knight on f3 instead of our pawn on d4. And at first it seems like just another sequence of moves, but it makes a big difference. So here knight g3 hits the bishop, and bishop g6 is hard to believe that this move is basically a losing blunder, but it's impossible to foresee it. It's very advanced. And here you continue with pawn h4, launching your attack straight away. You want to push the pawn forward and trap the bishop. They need to provide an escape square by playing h6 or h5, doesn't matter, and then you go knight e5, attacking this bishop once again. And it's not just an exchange, of course, because if black allow this trade, guess what? I'll just play it out. If you look at this position, you can see that now the king is deadly exposed. All these squares are weak. This g6 pawn is an easy target for your bishop, for your queen, and black is basically done. They certainly cannot allow that. That is why once you attack the bishop, they'll try to drop it back. And now they're very close to getting back to usual Caro-Kann stuff, but instead you play queen h5. Wait, are you hoping for scholar's mate? Why not? The thing is, it's not easy for black to defend it. They gotta play pawn g6, and even though they push your queen back, now this bishop on h7 is permanently locked there. It just can't get out completely. It literally has no moves to go to. Moreover, instead of moving your queen, you can develop your bishop, as if you just pre-move this move, because good things come to those who bait. And in case they accept the queen, that is yet another checkmate. Of course, your opponent can avoid an immediate checkmate, but his position is already lost anyway. As you can see, this whole pawn structure is ridiculous. This bishop on h7 is trapped. He's totally undeveloped, while you're already putting up together a pretty strong attack. And after virtually any move of black, you're going to sacrifice your knight, destroy his position, and win the game. What if your opponent is more advanced or better prepared and knows what to do? The move played by pros here is bishop g4. Indeed, there is no need for black to trade on e4, it only allows white to centralize his knight, which is good for white. Therefore, bishop g4 straight away, aiming to bring the bishop out and only then lock the central pawn chain, is the right move. Now you can play pawn h3, and this move is also super tricky. Here in this position, black really needs to trade on f3. I'll show you in a moment what to do in that case, but bishop h5 is another supernatural move, which is actually a big inaccuracy, and here you have also this sudden opportunity to unleash a powerful attack similar to the previous variation. Initially you trade in the middle of the board to avoid any tension there, and then you start chasing this bishop. Again, that is somewhat similar to what we have done in the previous variation. Now we go h4, aiming to trap the bishop, and as he tries to provide an escape square, you then play knight e5, the same attacking idea. You bring your knight into the attack while threatening to take right there and to ruin his pawn structure, also opening up his king. And as the bishop slides back, you play bishop b5 check, and this trivial check wins the game. And again, bishop b5 is such a standard opening move, such as, the rook lopes, etc. But here it just wins the game on the spot, because your knight also controls these two squares. And black can't cover his king without losing a ton of material, as well as his queen. For example, knight c6, you just trade here, you also attack the queen, and after this exchange, there is nothing left for black but to give up the queen, and of course after that you'll still end up with a totally winning position. Finally, let's talk about the correct way for black. They should not retreat, then this bishop is in danger, they need to trade, and after that you put pressure to this pawn on d5, therefore they need to defend it, they go pawn e6. Now your opponent is relatively secure, they got what they want, they have this central pawn chain, and they traded off that bad light square bishop. Alright, cool. What are we going to do next? We're going to play pawn d4, and I really like that move, especially for blitz. Now, pros, grandmasters, they play d3, which leads to a more solid positional game, but I think no need to be so accurate when you're playing blitz, you need to be more aggressive. So we go d4, and the idea here, you just develop your pieces comfortably, you've got this strong center, you've got two bishops. If your opponent never captures here, at some point you will push this pawn forward and kick his knight away, you can develop the bishop, of course, you can castle, life's good. The only potential downside, and that is why grandmasters sometimes don't play this variation, is that black can at some point trade on e4 and then this pawn on d4 is hanging. Right? Therefore, black can go ahead and capture this pawn. And although temporarily black is happy, they snatched your pawn, but what they don't realize is that currently they're on a highway to Blunderville. You can attack the queen once again, simply seeking quick development and attack. Plus, we're also putting pressure to this knight, let's not forget about that. And if the queen simply retreats, you can castle kingside or queenside with a ton of attack. If your opponent captures this pawn on b2 attacking your rook, that is another losing mistake. That's what I really love about all these variations. Very often, most natural move of black here is a straightforward blunder. Here you castle kingside, and now just look at this. You've completed your development, while for black, their king is centralized, they're totally underdeveloped, and the queen is keep dancing around. Moreover, you keep putting pressure right here, rook b1 is coming, attacking the queen, and if they decide to trade knights, which is something that they usually do, you could of course just recapture, but it's even stronger to play this in between attacking move rook b1, hitting the queen. And that is why capturing that pawn on b2 was wrong for black. Now, you gain a tempo to bring your rook into the attack, plus once the queen moves, that pawn on b7 will become vulnerable. And that whole attack along the b-file is basically unbearable for black. You can even flex like Carlsen and say, my b game is usually enough to win. In this case, it really is. Now, once the queen moves somewhere, let's say queen f6, they offer an exchange of queens. Of course, we don't want to trade queens, we want to attack. Now you pick up this knight, and this pawn on b7 is hanging. They're going to need to do something about that. Let's say they move it forward. They still need a couple more moves to complete their development and to put their king to safety, but we're going to start our attack straight away. We go bishop b5. Pretty cool move, attacking the pawn, not just a pawn, we want to capture it with a double attack to his king and rook. And he can't take our bishop because the pawn is pinned, literally, crisscross pin. And how can black defend it? There's no way really. Maybe e5, trying to defend the pawn that way. But now we can try to deflect the queen by sacrificing the other bishop. Just look at what happened to the supposedly very solid Caro-Kann defense. Now the queen cannot capture the bishop. In this case, bishop takes c6 would win the game thanks to his double attack, and we get to their king. Which means that the queen needs to keep guarding this pawn, and it needs to get itself away from this danger. Once the queen moves, you keep attacking it. This time it also needs to guard this one on e5, this pawn, and the queen needs to move. So queen d6 is forced. Now rook d1, we keep chasing, keep gaining tempos, and once the queen returns back to keep maintaining this pawn, we grab it anyway. And you finish the game in style. With that being said, I totally agree with what some of you guys write in comments. You can't become a strong chess player by following tricky chess openings. That's why if you're serious about your chess progress, head to this free masterclass where in just one video I summarized most important ideas that you need to know. Positional play, strategy, middle game, things that actually get you to the next level in chess. Check this out and have a great day.